Hey guys, it's Angelo, and welcome to my Shadow Priest guide for patch 7.2 in World of Warcraft Legion. Compared to 7.1.5, not many things have changed for the Shadow Priest, and ultimately, we see more change in our damage output rather than in our actual gameplay. However, as we are 2.5 content patches into the game by now, and most of us have a variety of legendaries thus far, as well as interesting gear and stats, gameplay-wise, there is more variety found in your day-to-day play now more than there has ever been before. But one step at a time, of course. Let's do the most obvious things first and take a look at our stat priorities as well as our talents. When it comes to what stats we go for, essentially the only thing that has changed is that we have more stats to play around with now, giving us more wiggle room in certain situations. In a normalized setting, we'd still want to go for haste, but only up to the point where mastery begins to outscale haste and proves to be a more lucrative source of damage. Players disagree at where this point really is. While some say this is at 30% haste, you see most good Shadow Priests, or rather priests with good gear, being at around 25 to 26% haste and anywhere between 82 and 90% mastery. Many factors come into play here to help with your decisions. Your trinkets, whether or not you have your 4-set bonus, and of course your legendaries. If, for example, you have an erratic metronome dropped by the chromatic anomaly in the Untitled, you don't need 30% haste flat because the trinket uptime is anywhere between 75 and 78% during a regular encounter, meaning that you will be at and over 30% haste for any part of a fight and can push more of your gear towards mastery. Stat stick trinkets are another big factor. If you have a haste stat stick, you will generally have more than enough haste to reach 30%, and, especially with a metronome once more or another haste stat stick, won't need to pay more attention to that stat. If these factors don't apply to you, haste should be prioritized in most situations, as this lets your dot stick faster, your void torrents do more damage via snapshotting, and will generally ease your gameplay, as void forms will come about a lot faster. When it comes to talents, our Legacy of the Void build is still prevalent in comparison to other talent combinations at this time, and this is greatly influenced by the fact that Mastery scaled so well with our 4-set tier 19 bonus, as 5 Void Bolts, even 6 sometimes in a row, hit like a truck with a lot of Mastery, which most currently of us have. This keeps talents like Sand Lane, Power Infusion, and of course Lingering Insanity at the top of their tier, only leaving room for the other talents in very specific situations. For your regular, normal, and heroic raids, the talent tree shown to the right should be your standardized set and only varies on fights like Scorpion, Crozus, and, depending on the tactic, Tichondrius. You will pretty much never switch out Twisted Fate, Mind Bomb, or Body and Soul, nor really do it with Lingering Insanity, and the only thing you should really consider switching is Power Infusion if there are a lot of adds to cleave, therefore going for Misery to save global cooldowns, or bosses that are very short-lived, which makes Surrender to Madness lucrative again. If Surrender to Madness is taken, which will only be for Crozus and Botanist Talarn realistically speaking, Reaper of Souls and Auspicious Spirits find their use once more, but again, this will only be the case if your raid setup allows it and if a boss is on easy farm status. Mythic Plus dungeons, or Mythic Keystones, saw great changes coming their way with 7.2, but those honestly only hurt the Shadow Priest rather than to help. Now, once more, we find ourselves at the bottom of the food chain, and even higher keystone levels, where we usually shine, can easily be completed with classes that are more AoE and burst heavy. Two things that are seemingly non-existent for the Shadow Priest at this time. Now, it needs to be added that this is not because we do bad AoE damage or bad burst in that sense, it's just that both aspects of gameplay are executed better by other classes, without the ramp-up time that we have currently. For these dungeons, I suggest sticking to the regular Legacy of the Void build again displayed on the screen. You can potentially switch Legacy of the Void for Shadow Crash, but however for that to really work your tank needs to be very good, or rather needs to know how to move adds. Certain legendaries will become incredibly dominant here, more than in a raid environment. Cepha's secret, if you have it, should be used in every single dungeon on any Mythic Plus level, as the damage increase it now gives to you is way too serious to just ignore. Since the bracers got nerfed, these shouldn't really be used if you have any alternative like the shoulders or the belt. The Twins' Painful Touch, the Shadow Priest ring, also has its use here, but realistically only on low level keys. When it comes to a rotation, nothing has really changed. You should keep your Void Bolt on cooldown, and be sure that every target in combat with you is dotted with Vampiric Touch and Shadow Word Pain. With up to 3 targets, this remains true, but once you hit 4 targets, you should consider giving only a Shadow Word Pain to the 4th enemy, unless they will live for an extended period of time. Anything above this number should just be dotted with Shadow Word Pain, unless you're running Misery, and simply fill with keeping your Mind Flayed channel rolling in that case, with the occasional Void Bolt when it's ready to be used. The use of Power Infusion depends on multiple factors: your base haste level, and whether or not you have the legendary shoulders. If you have your legendary shoulders, Power Infusion can be delayed a bit, and the same goes for when you have 30% or even more haste. I personally own the shoulders and the belt and consider that my main legendary combination. On most fights, especially single target, I use Power Infusion at around 17 to 18 stacks of Void Form and usually exit my Void Form anywhere between 40 and 45 stacks. The use of Void Torrent is situational really. If you're able to snapshot a sick Void Torrent without having to sacrifice one entire use of it by delaying it for too long, then you should most certainly do that. If you are unsure or don't know how long the fight will last, you should use your Void Torrent right after your 5 Void Bolts from your 4 set, or simply after your first Void Bolt if you don't have the 4 set. If you have the belt, and your 4 set of course, you should use your 5 Void Bolts and then your 2 Mind Blasts, then another Void Bolt, and then your Void Torrent in said situation. With any other legendary, this rotational change does not apply, but with the belt, this is pretty important. Now, if we were to summarize, the Shadow Priest still has its superior positive aspects, but also has its negative ones in certain scenarios. While still one of the, if not the strongest, cleave classes in the game, our single target has suffered greatly since release, and even Surrender to Madness won't compensate for that currently. The class is very strong if it is allowed to utilize multiple targets, not only for insanity generation, but also therefore for more Void Bolts due to longer Void Forms and more Void Form uptime in total. Once we have too many targets in front of us, however, we are forced to basically use half a toolkit to patchwork our DPS, and this results in inferior AoE damage due to the other half of our kit taking way too long to ramp up in order to make good use of it. This, however, is once more countered by our ability to deal ridiculous DPS once a target is in execute range, making us remain one of the best range DPS classes to bring for long boss fights or for fights that become difficult towards the end of the encounter. What also needs to be added is that through the various changes we have seen thus far, the class is most certainly easier to play at a competitive level and does not require the player to take almost unbearable risks anymore as were needed while Surrender to Madness was still dominant. Overall, I still believe that the Shadow Priest is a great class and currently still in a very positive position. We are by no means the best class anymore overall, but still compete in the higher tiers of the damage hierarchy. Now, as always, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've learned something from this video and have gained some insights about the class which will help you with your future decision making. Should you have any questions, be sure to ask away in the comment section below or shoot me a message and I will be sure to get back to you as fast as possible. If this video was of help to you, be sure to leave a like, and if you want to see more of my content in the future, feel free to subscribe. Now, as always, have a good one, my friends, and I will see you all in the next one. A lifetime in repeat.